We like to call it the Supernatural Hour. And now, our hosts.
Hey, welcome to the Supernatural Hour podcast. I'm your host, Raven.
I'm Rogue.
I'm Chad.
And I'm Emmett.
To our main topic, we're going to talk about the Queen Mary. And not Queen
Not
Mary,
the Queen Mary.
The Queen Mary, the ship. And I've been there.
I have been there also.
Okay, we got to hear
Did
the
you stay in the
stories.
hotel?
No, we didn't. But we walked around in it.
Steerage.
I've actually been there a couple times. So going back to bagpipes, they actually have a bagpipe competition there. I don't know if they've had it since COVID, but I think they have. I think they started it back up. Anyway, so I've been there several times for a bagpipe competition, and it's a hotel now. I mean, it's just docked at Longbeach, California, and you can just go wander around in it like you could go wander around in a hotel. And so I went, and I had, so I was in my kilt, and I took, I just kind of snuck on a K2. I didn't take all my stuff, and I wandered around, and
No dowsing rods?
I didn't have dowsing rods then. I didn't know about dowsing rods at the time. This was a long time ago. And then, if you know me, I'm just slightly irreverent sometimes. And if you put "do not enter" on something, I want to know why, and I will enter because I want to find out why.
Oh.
So there was places on there that's like, "Don't go past this rope." I'm like, "No, yeah, watch me." And so I went over the rope and looked, and I don't go far. I don't push that envelope too far, but I push a little bit, right, Chad?
Yeah.
I don't like how you said that.
What was behind that answer?
I don't like that tone. I don't. So, it says do not go past this door. I'm like, okay, door's unlocked. If you don't want me to go there, lock it. So I wandered down there just a little bit.
You do have some limitations on how far you'll go.
I have a little couth. I'm not completely uncouth.
I'll agree.
Okay. Anyway, but I didn't wander around too far, and I felt a little bit weird. I don't know.
How can you not wander around too far on that?
Well, because it said do not enter, so you don't want to get down there too far and then
When does that ever stop?
go to jail. I know. I just went a little ways. Because, you can always play a little bit dumb. Oh, I didn't see that.
Don't trespass, people. We're telling you, it's always get permission, but
No, I don't ever.
sometimes we do sneak under the ropes.
I don't ever full on trespass.
Right.
But I'll stick my toe in the water. I don't jump all the way in, but I'll test it and see how warm it is. Anyway,
I'll go behind the ropes.
So no, if I do, it's just like a step or two. It's just I'll poke my head around or something. But I poked my head around. I waved my K2 meter around and asked a few questions. If I remember right, I do think I got a couple EVPs. I'll have to see if I can find those. Anyway, let's talk about the ship, not about me being semi-irreverent.
Okay, the ship. It's big. It's about twice as big as the Titanic.
It
Right.
is. It's about 1,000 feet long. Time magazine has it as one of the top 10 most haunted places in the United States. So it's pretty haunted. And it's actually almost more known for being haunted than any of its history. And its history is kind of amazing.
Yeah.
So who haunts? Who haunts the ship?
Pretty much everybody.
Everybody. Passengers, owners, people.
Yep.
Passers
Awesome.
through.
That is everybody.
Yep. So let's just kind of talk about some of the facts about it first. It was a premium ocean liner. It sailed in the North Atlantic, 1,000 feet long. It was supposedly faster. It was the fastest ship in its era. It was faster and more powerful and bigger than the Titanic. 1,000 feet long. Did I say that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I said it again.
Almost a fifth of a mile.
And what
Sorry.
year was it built?
So it started in 1930. Was when they first started. They're like,
When they
hey,
laid down the
let's-
keel.
Yeah, that's fancy talk. I was going to say started to build it. But then the Depression came, and with the Depression, it kind of held up the construction for several years. And so they started it back up in about 1931 to 1934. And then its maiden voyage was 1936, and it went from Southampton, England, to Cherbourg, France, and then to New York.
And when did the Titanic go? So is this before or after the
1912.
Titanic?
Yeah, 1912.
1912.
April
forgot.
14th. I remember that because it's my son's birthday. I mean, he wasn't born in 1912, but April 14th.
Okay, so this is like 20 years after.
Yeah, the Titanic was pre-war, and this was post-war.
Yeah. And this ship, if you...
Well, this was actually post, when you say war,
Almost kind of
World War
during
I.
World War
War
One,
II.
right?
Yeah, it was right before World War II.
Right, and it actually did a lot of stuff in World War II, which is why, the fact that it's most known for its being haunted overshadows what it did in World War II.
Yeah, it was conscripted and used for troop transport, wasn't it? And horses and such? Or...
Oh, yeah. No, it ferried
Yeah.
troops back and forth. They painted it gray, because its original colors was like the Titanic.
It's that black with the white
and the red stripes.
pretty,
civilian colors.
yeah, pretty outstanding. It's made to pop so people can see it because it's part of your advertising. You got to make your ship look really cool.
Right, but for the war, they wanted it to kind of hide because they don't want it to stand out. So they painted it gray, and they actually called it the Gray Ghost, which I think was a little foreshadowing there. But it ferried troops. I've got so many notes on this. It's crazy.
Yeah, one of the stories or things about it was so fast it could outrun all of its escort ships and those kinds of things. Because it had been built as an ocean liner to get people, very wealthy people across the Atlantic as quickly as possible in the day before, air travel was really a main thing. And so that's how the wealthy traveled, and that ship was extremely fast.
Your choice was a luxury liner or a Zeppelin.
Yeah, and I mean, the elite thought that this was the only civilized way to travel. And so the people that were on this ship were people like the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, Greta Garbo, Clark Gable, Mary Pickford, Winston Churchill. I mean, if you had money, this is the way you traveled. There was no other way. So, it was very, very elite. And like any ship, you watch Titanic, there's the first class, second class, third class. And this ship was no different. There was third class quarters, which is where I probably would have been had I been there at the time. But the interesting thing, so in its World War II days, it set a record for carrying the most people in World War II, which was 16,683.
In one trip?
In one crossing?
In one crossing.
Wow.
Yep. It participated in the D-Day invasion and had a significant role in virtually every Allied campaign.
Wow.
So it was one of the major ships that they used. In part because it was fast, because it was large, had a huge carrying capacity.
Yeah, lots and lots of people.
Yep. So at the close of the war, as the war's winding down, they had these voyages that they called brides and baby voyages, because it had 13 of these voyages, and in the 13 of these voyages, they transported 22,000 war brides and children from Europe
to America,
to the United States and Canada. And those all took place in 1946.
Wow. Yeah, you don't think about that, but, you've got young men away from home, and, you're going to have marriages and babies and people falling in love. That's quite amazing. And then bringing, the war brides back with them.
Yep. So then, in 1947, after the war and after they get all the brides and babies, here in Canada, they started the cruises again. And it was, once again, a big cruise ship, people, glad that the war's over. They can start doing cruises again, because they've got the time, they've got the funds. Yeah.
Just during the war, there was one story, and I don't know if you're going to touch on this later or not, but there was an escort ship that was in front of it, and it was going, and the Queen Mary actually ran over this escort ship and broke it in half. Because, it had, thousands and thousands of people on the ship. It couldn't stop to wait, to look for survivors on the ship. Most of the people on that ship that it hit actually died. It literally cut the ship in half. Many of the people got thrown in under the wake. and it was 2 or 3 hours before other ships were able to get to that ship.
Yeah, I actually read an article about that, and it said that per protocol,
Mm-hmm.
and if someone knows more about protocol than me, you can correct me if I'm wrong, and we'll air that correction, but they determined that with everything that went on, it would be safer just to let it go, because if they had stopped, they would actually put more people in danger.
Oh, yes. A submarine could have got them and sunk the ship and lost literally thousands and thousands of lives rather than the 100 or the few hundred that were on this other ship. It's a tragedy, but this is one of the areas they say is very haunted, is that bow area that hit that other ship. That's one of those really, really hot spots.
Yeah, so that could be some of the 150 plus spirits that haunt this hotel. So it starts, the cruises again after the war in 1947. And in the 60s, as air travel became more popular, cruising, especially cross-Atlantic.
Yeah, when you can get across the ocean in 5 or 6 hours or 7 hours rather than 3 days, 4
Right.
days.
Right. I mean, cruises are still very popular. My parents go on a cruise every year. But if they're going to go on a Mediterranean cruise or a cruise around England, they fly there and then hop on the ship and just tool around the coast, right? Did I not write the year down? So Longbeach actually bought the Queen Mary. Do you know how much they bought her for?
No.
They bought her for
$24 worth of beads.
Yes.
Not quite that good of a deal.
And some ice
Just a
cream.
guess.
$3.45 million. And she is permanently birthed. Is that the right word?
Mm-hmm.
Permanently birthed in Long Beach, California. So let's talk about the ghosts, because this isn't the History Channel.
Ghosts, plural.
Ghosts, there are many. As you are probably not surprised, some of the things that are reported are creaking of doors, knocks, sudden squeals, laughter, people talking and whistling in empty rooms, lights being switched off and on. I mean, yeah.
We were a little late, but we're there on that laughter.
So I mean, nothing there is atypical of
A haunting.
a haunting, right? But the thing that kind of stands out is the stories that the crew and the staff of the Queen Mary get are so regular. It's not like, just a one-off story here and there. I mean, they hear the same stories, the same evidence. I don't want to say complaints, but the same. They get the same evidence, told to them over and over and over and over again, and it just kind of leads to the credibility. If you try to say lead and credibility at the same time, you say led. It lends to the credibility of these hauntings because they just hear it over and over and over again. It's not like they're hearing, thousands of different stories from
The
thousands
same
of different
things
people.
happening in the same parts of the ship
Yep.
over
Is there-
and over.
They're
Is
getting
there a lady in white?
Yes, there is. Yeah,
Okay.
they're hearing the same, 25 stories from thousands and thousands of people. That tends to
good.
kind of confirm it. So, should we talk about some of these actual
What are
hauntings?
those amazing stories?
We have so
Yeah.
many. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Do you guys have
You have
any
a list?
you want? You guys?
Yep.
I don't have a list.
Well, I know there a famous researcher. I can't remember his name now. He actually spent like 20 years or something researching the paranormal on the boat, and his name's
Ooh.
escaping me. I'm having a senior moment. But
No, Emmett, you're having a silver moment.
that's silver bone. Yeah, silver
Thank
alert.
you.
Anyway, go on. It's fascinating.
Okay, so maybe we'll get to it because there's a bunch of stories. There's really a whole lot. Here's a couple. I missed some of the evidence. There's drastic temperature changes at certain parts of the ship, particularly near the second class pool. There's a certain stateroom. There's a shaft alley, and there's like an adjacent bathroom to the shaft alley where they will fill these.
Second class gets a pool.
Yeah,
Wow,
yeah.
must be below decks.
Is it clean?
Probably below deck.
Yeah, I actually saw some videos, some YouTubes on the pool and the different area that's quite a haunted area. In fact, one that I will share, the curator is one of the curators of the Queen Mary. He'd actually been on the Titanic there, and he said he'd spent a lot of time with Titanic and Titanic artifacts and everything else, and he said he had never had any kind of haunting, weird, paranormal kinds of things with all the artifacts that he'd been around for, years researching. And he said, came to the Queen Mary, and he said he had 3 very distinct situations where there was paranormal, and he said the one that was just really vivid to him, he said this would have been in the he said it was in the late 70s, early 80s, and he was at the pool, and he had turned the corner, and there was a woman, blonde with the iron 1960s hair, kind of 1960s clothing, coming up the stairs, and he was going to ask what she needed or whatever, and he went past the pillar, and when he went around the pillar, there was no one there. And he said there was no way for anybody to be gone. And he thought about it. He goes, the clothing was out of, wasn't right. And he goes, and they were like the linoleum or the marble stairs going up. And he goes, there was no sound. And it hit him afterwards that was an apparition. But he said it wasn't, ghostly. He said it was full solid. He thought it was a woman that was wearing out of fashion clothing, from like the mid 60s, kind of hippie 60s. And this was more in the disco era.
Yeah, that is actually one of the phenomenon that happens there. I'm going to come back to that really quick. In the stateroom, it says that there's a smell like cigars and sometimes perfume. So those are, but the other thing, the last thing that I wanted to talk about just a little bit more, because there's a little more information about it, is one thing that many, many people say is that it's almost like they're transported back in time and they will recreate, and it's not very long, just a few seconds, but like that.
Moments. Yeah.
Just a couple moments in time where they see people as though they are there. And several people said, yeah, we thought it was like a reenactment, but then we would turn and everything would be gone. And so there's some sort of, I don't know if it's ghosts, I don't know if it's, paranormal as far as just spirits coming
time
to
portal,
them, or if it's some sort of a funky time portal that...
So it's just people or entire scenes have vanished?
Both.
This same guy...
Because I've seen the people that are, when you see them and then you look back and they're gone, I've seen that. But I've never seen an entire scene vanish.
This is reminding me of a movie. Do you know what movie I'm talking about?
No.
Oh, what is that movie?
The Shining.
No.
That's what it's making me think of.
There's a movie where they're on a ship.
Ghost Ship?
I don't know.
Ghost Ship was an interesting movie. That's probably the one you're thinking of.
I'm really bad with movies.
Where it was from back in the 1950s or 1960s.
Yeah, I think so.
And they were salvaging the ship. The ghost ship had all this gold on it. It's very interesting movie.
No, I don't think that's
So the one where all the people were cut in half?
Yes.
Yeah, that was Ghost Ship.
That's Ghost Ship?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's all I know about it. I'm not going to talk about it anymore.
Oh, that was a great scene. So they're all dancing and all, dressed up in, late 1950s, dancing out on the ship, and one of the wires that's under tension breaks loose and just literally cut everybody in half. It's quite a scene. So if you ever want to see a really gory, bloody ship ghost scene, death scene, Ghost Ship has got it.
Okay, and just to clarify, talking about this movie has nothing to do with the Queen Mary. That was my squirrel moment. It does.
You were talking about spooky, ghosty ships.
Okay, but this didn't happen on the Queen Mary.
No, this did not happen on the Queen Mary.
Okay.
But it was nautical, but
it's nautical, and it's about ghost ships.
It's a remotely apropos sidebar.
This is what happens when you talk with Raven. You go off on 800 tangents. Okay, back to the Queen Mary. There was a fellow named Captain Treasure Jones, and I'm sorry, that is a cool name.
Treasure Jones.
Captain Treasure Jones.
That's
Anyway.
Indiana Jones' brother.
Right?
His nautical brother.
Yeah.
Anyway, he was stationed on the Queen Mary from 1965 to 1967. He died at the age of 87, just kind of normally. I mean, not tragically or anything. In 1993, but I guess he really just loved his job and loved the ship, and he smoked cigars all the time. So a lot of people think that the cigar smoke that they smell in the stateroom is him just kind of visiting, hanging out. And he doesn't do anything
Well, obviously,
bad.
There's no smoking allowed there anymore, right? So it
Right.
must be a paranormal nature.
Yep. So
You
they
smell it.
Yeah. So if you're ever on the Queen Mary and you smell cigar smoke, it's probably just say, "Hey, Treasure." Probably better call him Captain Treasure, but one of the ones that gets talked about a lot is a crewman. He is seen in blue coveralls. That he has a beard, And there's a well-known incident of a fireman, and as you research it, it says there were 2 people that were crushed by this watertight door.
On compartment 13.
Mm-hmm. And it actually, in door 13, it was filmed, it was used in the film Poseidon Adventure.
Oh.
So you can see this. But the one that they named, I couldn't find the name of the second person, but they do name one. His name is John Henry. He was 18 years old, and he was crushed by this door in 1966. They were having a drill, and just the drill went poorly. And he was killed, crushed in that watertight door. And he haunts that doorway. He will run behind people and whistle, almost like he's trying to warn them. And sometimes he will walk up to people and ask if they've seen his wrench. And when people, when someone comes up behind you and talks to you and kind of see him out of the corner of your eye, people will turn to say, no, I haven't seen a wrench. And, he's gone. He'll hang out in like the maintenance area that he worked in behind that watertight door. And so he'll kind of hang out in both of those areas. One of the things around the pool, and I think this was, unless I remember wrong, kind of a rough day for my brain today, there's wet footprints that they will find. And the thing about these wet footprints by the pool...
Oh, I've heard about that.
Yeah, and I thought it said the 3rd class pool. I think 3rd class had a pool too. But it was either by the 1st or 2nd class pool. These footprints...
3rd class was just a pond. It wasn't really a pool.
Just kind of a low point in the...
Right, yeah. The bilge. It splash around in the bottom of the ship.
In the puddle. But they don't have water in those pools anymore. So it's not like, someone got out and we just didn't see him swimming. There's no water in those pools, but people will see wet footprints as though someone has gotten out of the pool.
And gone up the stairs.
Gone up the stairs
That's
and walked around.
spooky.
People see that. In fact, it says, I will read you my notes verbatim. Appearance of wet footprints when no swimming activity is possible, often mentioned. This is one of those... that people are always talking about, oh yeah, I saw wet footprints. So there is a stateroom. We talked about the stateroom earlier. The number of the stateroom is B340. And stuff happens in there to the staff and people that have stayed there so frequently that staff refuse to go inside. And like the current, I guess there's a current captain of the ship, even though it's a hotel. He will not go inside of the stateroom. So in 1967, they actually took 3 third-class rooms and renovated it to make B340. And it was after this renovation that weird things started to happen. The thing about researching is you research several different websites, and one will just give you a tidbit, then you'll go to another one, and it gives you more tidbits, and so my notes jump all over the place. So as far as this stateroom, B340, the story says that back in the 60s, the staff locked a man in one of these third-class cabins after he murdered 2 women. And during the night, he's beating on the door, screaming that something's in the room with him, right? And he's locked in there because he's, a murderer, and they don't want him wandering around the ship. And, there's people outside the door kind of keeping an eye on it, and they're like, yeah, whatever, we're not letting you out because we don't want you killing more people. But he's screaming, there's something in here with me. And then he, stopped, and they're like, oh, finally, he went to sleep or whatever. And in the morning, they opened the door, to, I don't know, give him food or whatever. And they said when they opened the door, he was dead. Not just dead, but he was dead, mangled, and torn apart.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I thought, oh, that's creepy.
Killing yourself is one thing. Tearing yourself apart afterwards is more difficult.
That takes talent.
How do you do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't. One woman said that the blankets were ripped off of her in the middle of the night, and there was a man looming over her at the end of the bed. And so many reports of creepy things happening in room B340 that they actually closed it to the public for 30 years. They reopened it in 2018 as a haunted attraction. And if you go there and rent B340, the key comes with a fierce warning. And like I said before, the current captain refuses to enter that room. He won't go in there. He's like, nope, I'm out. So you can stay in there if you want, but you get a fierce warning. And if you wake up all torn apart, I warned you.
There are some YouTube videos about that room. I watched a couple of those, and quite interesting. So yeah, if and it is rented out as a paranormal attraction. Not, it's
So
not.
did anybody stay there? Do we get recordings of people staying there?
Yeah, I've seen a couple with, I forget what the name of it was. It's a pretty popular one where there's
And they made
a
it out
believer
alive.
and a skeptic, and
Zach didn't die.
yeah, they didn't die.
Yeah. And in that same room, if we're looking for reasons, why that area is haunted, another story says that there's a young woman named Dana. She was murdered with her family. Her little sister, mom were strangled on the bed. Dana was shot in the bathroom. And she can actually be found with some of the other children on board. She can also be found with John. Remember John? The little fellow or the young fellow that was crushed under
Crushed in the door?
Yeah, he's found in the boiler room. She can sometimes be found in the boiler room. There's a ghost named Grumpy that also sometimes hangs out in the boiler room. It seems like it's like
The hangout place,
it's the office cooler.
Ghost Central.
Ghost Central, So Grumpy the ghost, he's called Grumpy the Growling Ghost. His identity is unknown, but he growls at visitors. He lurks under the stairs near the first class pool and sometimes in the boiler room with John Henry. And you can actually find audio recordings of him online. If you just Google, Grumpy the Ghost audio recordings, you can find a whole bunch of them.
Interesting.
All right, so let's see. I have more stories. I got more stuff. There's a little girl named Jackie, and allegedly she drowned in a pool. And I say allegedly because some people say she drowned in the pool. Some people say there are no stories of people drowning in the pool.
No confirmed.
Mm-hmm. So, anyway, but there's a little ghost girl named Jackie. There's, Rogue, you mentioned the lady in white. A lot of people say they have seen a lady in an elegant white gown who dances alone in the shadows in the corner of her room. There's also a lot of reports of a tall, dark-haired man in a kind of a 1930s era suit. And the lady in white is also kind of that 1930s, 40s era. And they see this tall, dark man in the suit. They also hear water running and phones ringing in the early hours that shouldn't be ringing. One of the other stories, and this makes sense because of the brides and babies voyages, they say there's a ton of reports of children crying when there's no children in the area, laughing in the third-class playroom nursery. There's sightings of a little girl who drowned. We already talked about that. I guess on the ship, during one of the voyages, there was a baby who was born but died from complications right after birth. So there is a report of a baby who died. There are also 49 confirmed deaths on the ship over the course of its years
Travels.
of service. Mm-hmm.
Only 49. That's not very many confirmed. When you consider how many people had been on it, the kind of people that travel on these kinds of ships, oftentimes wealthy, elderly people. Almost all big ships have morgues. Even Carnival and these, they all have morgues in places because as you're dealing with more elderly people, there's high percentages chances that, somebody, when you have thousands of people aboard, somebody can die when you're dealing with old people. So I'm surprised it's only in the 40s.
Yep. Yeah, and those are, that's 49 confirmed.
Confirmed.
That they actually have records of. And as I was just kind of flipping through my notes to make sure we didn't forget anything that was cool. And we kind of talked about this just a second ago, but I want to just restate it maybe with some better words because words hard today. It just says reports of apparitions and events that could not be taking place on a ship out of commission for over 40 years. So there's, people are seeing, 1930s, 40s, World War II era people working and doing things that they would have been doing, as the ship's chugging across the sea or, things that
Echoes in time.
You cannot explain how they would see that, having it just moored in California, being used as a hotel.
I wonder if, probably a lot of this is residual and just, a part of the fabric of the ship itself now, but there's undoubtedly also, intelligent spirits hanging around.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like the whole ship is just thick with everything.
Yeah. It says, like we said before, the pools are no longer used, but women have been seen in 1930s style swimming suits. People hear the sounds of splashing. Just think of the sounds you hear at the pool, kids laughing and splashing. They have also seen a young girl clutching a teddy bear, and I don't know if that's Jackie or if it's somebody different. Yeah, just a lot of really spooky stuff that goes on that ship. And like I said, I haven't spent a considerable amount of time on the ship, but I've been inside of it twice. And it definitely has a very heavy, thick feel is really the best way I can describe it.
Not necessarily evil or... but just thick?
I would say mostly thick. Certain parts, you could tell there was some malevolent stuff going on.
Okay.
Honestly, that is why the place where I dipped my toe in where it said don't enter, and I was like, yeah, I'll enter a little bit. The reason why is because it felt a little malevolent, and I wanted to see what was.
I get it.
If there had been no feels, I would have been like, yeah, okay. But it was like, I don't know. I think there's something interesting back there.
Mm-hmm.
So I looked.
Cool.
So
anything else? What else you got in the hauntings? Historical.
Those are the ones. I mean, I'm sure that there's a ton. There's, reportedly 150 ghosts, but the ones that we talked about, those are really the ones that people see and report the most.
Yeah, and if you're interested in this and the Queen Mary, go out and check on YouTube. There's some very interesting ones about the rooms that I forget the number.
B340.
B340. There's several different investigators that go out and spend the night in that room. There's others that talk about this. The guy that was the curator that I told you about, he had 3 or 4 very interesting stories also. One was kind of that idea of time travel or seeing different scenes that weren't Longbeach while he was there, and things around him changed, that kind of time travel thing. So
right.
Very interesting stuff.
Yeah, and the fun thing is if you go there, I mean, Longbeach, I've been there several times, and it's a pretty little city. I think so. I mean, people that are from there might be like, what? I thought it was pretty. There's a really good Thai restaurant there. But also outside the Queen Mary, they have an old Soviet sub that you can go down, and we actually went through that sub. I mean, it's a museum. You can
What'd
go
you
down
pick up in there? Anything?
There were spirits there too. Again, I didn't go there to ghost hunt, so I didn't have any, a lot of equipment. I just kind of had to use my feels, but there were definitely, it had the same kind of a thick feel as the Queen Mary did. There's definitely a lot of spirits there. Definitely worth, in fact, I would like to go back there sometimes, to specifically ghost hunt and actually take equipment and, get permission to go around and investigate in certain places. I think that would be fantastic. I'm going to go to the Thai restaurant and get their coconut juice because it was really good.
Sounds like a plan. We'll do that.
They gave you a little spoon and you could eat the soft coconut off from the inside.
I remember.
Okay, squirrel. Okay, I'm done.
Okay. Check out our shop at advancedparanormal.com. Also, check out our social media stuff. We've got YouTube, TikTok, Patreon, all sorts of things.
We have Instagram, but Raven's really, really bad at posting on Instagram. I'll try to get better. I'm a better TikToker.
So how many TikTok people do we got?
Last time I looked, it was 2180, I think.
And I think we're about 265 subscribers on our YouTube channel, advancedparanormal.com.
Yeah, thank you. We appreciate it.
If you haven't subscribed, please do. We're trying to get our numbers up to get more access out there. The more people you have, the more impressions you get, which helps our visibility out on the platform. So we'd appreciate you to go out and subscribe and like our stuff out there.
You've been listening to the Supernatural Hour at AdvancedParanormal.com. The Supernatural Hour is part of the Radio Ronin network found at RadioRonin.com. Copyright by Advanced Paranormal Services.